Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and you're listening to the Forbes Books Podcast. And this episode, we're talking about project management. We all want to create projects and execute projects, but most of the time, you can't do any of that without a project manager handling task status, time entries, and wrangling files. And this week, my guest is a sought-after speaker and trainer in the industry. Her name is Denise Brinkmeyer. She is the president and CEO of Jump Technology Services and the author of Project Orienteering, a field guide for project leadership. Denise believes that anyone can reach their goals so long as they ask the right questions and then make a commitment to carry through the necessary actions. Hello, Denise.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you for asking. And, one of the reasons I want to get you on the podcast is because you become a leader in project management. And I always feel like project management is one of those sort of verticals or sectors of business that kind of gets forgotten. Like everyone wants to talk about the visionary CEO and talks about the way products change people's lives, but they forget that little middle part that happens to make those things work. Why do you think it gets lost in the shuffle for a lot of people?
Well, because the glamour and the fun is the big idea, right?
Right.
The actual implementation is the pain. The idea of a baby is wonderful. but developing that baby, delivering that baby, that's the hard part. Well, that's what they say. But then if you're a parent, you know that the hard part, even when they're 35 years old, is being a parent.
Right. And when did you realize that this was sort of like something, because I'm always fascinated, but I'm like a big fan of comic book movies and like origin stories. So what drew you to project management? What was it that like sort of really got like all the gears in your brain working?
Well, it's a very strange path that I ended up on. I have a background in theater. And in college, I studied communications with a minor in education so that I could be a speech, drama, and debate teacher. And theater production, and any type of production was part of what, I taught and part of the curriculum. And, we had stage productions. And through that process, you really learn a lot about project management, but it's never taught that way.
Right.
You have a show and you prepare for the show. And I think one of the best, most advantageous points of learning stage production before I became a project manager is that there is no stop the production and start again. And so it teaches you how to be pretty agile. You're on stage and someone misses a cue and you have to adapt. And when you learn that first before you go into project management, it really helps you prepare for the concept that something will probably go wrong and you just need to be prepared for it. Prepared in the way that you've thought ahead of time, maybe what could happen and have alternatives in mind.
Yeah. It's funny because it's one of these phrases, project management, a lot of people do, but they don't realize that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right?
And so that's what happened is I was a career changer and entered the world of technology, software specifically, became a coder, chasing those big bucks instead of the teacher's salary. While I was working in an IT company, it became clear that our projects lacked a project manager. I just kind of got sucked into, with my abilities, I would just say things like, well, don't we have a scope of work? Or, what are the requirements for what we're building? Is it written anywhere? And I would start asking things like that. And pretty soon they said, well, why don't you do that work for us?
That's funny. And,
Yeah.
and all those words, like, were they something you picked up organically, or were you like ingesting like a lot of business books? How would you even think of those, that kind of terminology?
Right. How would you know to
Yeah.
say scope of work or requirements?
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I think with requirements, if you train to be a programmer, you're going to look at the word requirements.
Yeah.
You're going to have a specification. But as far as contractual scope of work, I don't know where I got that, other than maybe my husband. My husband, who I met on the job, was a long time, 2 decades as a software engineer. And he would say, they have no idea what they're doing. But he's not naturally a project manager. That's not something he wants to do. But, of course, he recognized immediately that we needed project management at the company.
That's funny. And why do you think you said your husband wasn't naturally a project manager? What makes a project manager, you think?
An interest in doing that organization work, putting things together and monitoring and managing the people. Just the schedule management, he doesn't want to do. Most programmers don't want to do that stuff. They want to work on their part, and they want to participate in the team and deliver their part. But someone else has to do the job of project management. But I will tell you the truth: the actual rigor of project management is the part I probably enjoy the least, as he does, the scheduling and, the documentation. Probably most people. Well, I say that, but that's not exactly true. I do know some personalities that actually work for me that they really like the T crossing and the I dotting. That gets them going.
And I guess there are many levels to project management, right? It's like you said, there is that very minutia, in the weeds part of it, but there's also the master planning of project management, correct?
Correct. And it's interesting that you asked that. I just had a conversation the other day with a staff member who was saying, and they were referring to another staff member and saying they really need to show more leadership as a project manager. And I said, it's interesting that you say that, because leadership skills, they're not inherent. Just because you've trained as a project manager doesn't mean that you know how to lead.
Right, those soft skills.
To help, and help your team catch the vision. And it's very clear to me that leadership and management are two different things.
No doubt.
And my staff, that I have working for me in project management, manage very well, but they leave a lot of leadership to me. So that's kind of the area that we work on to cultivate leadership.
Well, that leadership word is a very loaded and complex word, because even if you think about it, like the greatest leaders of our time, like Steve Jobs, he was this visionary leader, but he sucked as a manager. And he actually wasn't that great a leader because he basically worked through fear and intimidation. So, there are varying levels of leadership, and which brings me to the point of, how do you lead project management where it doesn't make people feel like it's checking the boxes? I think that's sort of like the negative connotation of project management or projects in general. It's like, okay, I have these 5 boxes, I check them off, I'm done with it. So how do you separate those two, or actually bring them together?
Well, I think it's important to keep everybody focused on the mission. Everybody gets down into task management because the tasks, the activities, the deliverables all have to happen as part of the project, of course. And those are the items that you're monitoring. But if you fail to articulate the mission, that's where a lot of project management goes awry, because if a team member's understanding of what they're delivering doesn't mesh with the entire mission, they're going to deliver what they read or what they understood, but not necessarily what you needed.
And reading your book, Project Orienteering, you talk about your love of the TV show The Prophet and Marcus Lemonis. Without giving too much away, why was that such a big pivot point in your life when you discovered the show and saw what he was doing on that?
Well, because it created a framework. I thought he expressed very well a framework for a business to focus. It's really tough in our industry to work in custom software development, because then that means you could create anything. Anything is possible. And it's really hard to run a business doing just anything. The customers you're trying to sell to don't understand it. You can't market it because it's anything and everything. And when he talked about, he went to a business that was the same, where the owner, I believe she was a clothing designer, had vision and was very creative, but she had no focus. And so there was really no scope containing her business. And it was just everything that came into her mind to do. And I said to our team, that's what's happening to us, because we can't identify target customers. We don't know who to sell to. Our marketing is just a scattergun approach. Maybe, throw something at the wall.
Wow.
See if that works.
You got that just from watching that show, Denise? Jeez, what would happen if you didn't? Good thing it's CNBC in your cable package.
I know. I think I owe Marcus a big thank you for that, and CNBC for showing it.
Wow, that's amazing. And one of the quotes from your book is, and I love this, if you seek to be great, you won't be. If you seek to do great things for others, you might just become great. Where did this sort of greatness mindset come from?
Well, I believe in servant leadership. And I would say also my grandfather, my mom tells me a lot that I'm like my grandfather. My grandfather was an amazing entrepreneur, but when I watched him, he always came from a place, he wouldn't say, oh, I'm going to create this business because I'm inspired to do this business. It was always, well, I talked to this guy over here, and I'm going to help him with X, Y, and Z. That's what drove him, serving people, helping people. And I think that's what makes me get up in the morning at 1:30 a.m. to get caught up on my projects or whatever, because I know that I'm helping people.
And your grandfather, what kind of entrepreneurship did he delve with?
Oh, my goodness. He had a bulldozer business when he was really young. He told me a story of how he got involved selling life insurance.
Okay.
He became, he got recruited, and he learned a lot through that process. And then later on, he raised cattle. He had a farm that I loved to go to. He bought oil leases. He was a land developer.
Wow.
And let's see what else. Oh, they had a potpourri business, and they sold potpourri to like Dollar General. And,
oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah. And so one of my favorite stories, I was showing my husband the area that I grew up in, and Grandpa was driving. The county we lived in, you kind of spent time all over because different family members, people lived in different towns in the county. And I said, let's go down to Clarksville, where we lived for a short time. And Grandpa drove us down there, and we were driving around. And he said, there's new development up here in the hills. I want to go see the new housing development. So we drove up, and the road ended, and we ended up in somebody's driveway. He wasn't really paying attention to that. We were kind of like, this is somebody's driveway. Keep in mind, though, Clarksville is a small town in Missouri. So it's not like, you're in the inner city and
right.
People are like defensive and nervous. So this guy comes out of his house, and Grandpa's trying to back up and everything. And he looks out the windshield and he said, oh, I know that guy. Now to me, that was kind of incredible,
wow.
Right? He puts it in park, gets out of the car, goes and shakes hands with the guy, and we see him chat a little bit. He kind of, referred to us, and then waves goodbye, gets in the car, and then we go out to the edge of town where there was a factory that had shut down. And we kind of wanted to see all the development out at that end of town. And as we pulled into the factory parking lot to turn back around and head back the other way, a guy was locking up the building and came out, and Grandpa throws the car in park again and said, I got to talk to that guy. And I see them chatting and shake hands and, wave at each other, and he gets back out. And I said, Grandpa, who was that? He said, oh, and I don't remember the fellow's name, but he said, I'm going to work on a project with him. There's some stuff I've got to do for him. Now, I thought that is pretty incredible, from two ends of town in the county my grandpa lived in, but not in the town he lived in.
Wow.
So my impression was that grandpa knew a lot of people in the county, but what I witnessed that day was really what I witnessed most of the time, his concern and interest in helping other people.
Wow. It's so funny. Your grandpa was like a serial entrepreneur before that was even a thing, right? All these little things like networking, that wasn't a thing that your probably grandpa, the word even used, like he even knew what that meant, but he knew what networking was. It's so funny. As complicated as we make life today, like this is stuff that's been done for 30, 40 years. We just throw a lot of labels and complicated words on things, don't we?
I know. And I will confess, I hate that word networking. And the reason I think I hate it is because, some younger people, even though it's absolutely the correct word to explain the activity, but it almost loses the passion for what occurs and turns it into a task. You know what I mean? Where young staff come aboard and they say things like, well, you should go to that. That would be a great networking opportunity. And it almost, to me, when you say something like that, you've lost ROI. You are not being specific enough about what you're trying to accomplish. I don't think you should go to any networking event if you don't have specific goals, if you don't know who's going to be there. Yeah. And at that point, then I don't call it networking. I'm like Grandpa. I got to go talk to that guy. I got to go talk to that lady over there. I love that.
Yeah, it's funny. It does kind of make it cold because I feel like as great as LinkedIn is, I think people sort of misconstrue networking by having someone as a LinkedIn connection where there's just like you connect on LinkedIn and never speak to that human being ever again, yet he's part of your network. So yeah, that's such a great point. It's something that I think gets lost in people because I think the problem is, Denise, most people have so much trouble with the word you don't like, networking, but it is important. So they feel like they have to add some weight to it by like, oh, you have to network to do this. But it's like you said, it's really more about developing relationships as opposed to something we talked about earlier about checking the box of just having another person in your network.
Hey, you did a great job.
Oh,
look at that! You made it all the way back to our check boxes, and that's some skill there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're right that if you just come from that place of what you're trying to accomplish and going back to the check boxes, if you can articulate to team members, and that's one of the things we changed in our company too, is we began, once we really integrated project management into the company that I have now, really with more rigor. We still designed this system where it would write up the activities for the programmers, but we found that we still had some quality issues, and it was related to what I said before. They didn't necessarily understand the mission. And over time, I've trained our project managers to kind of back away from some of the academic language of project management and to write their user stories very simply, even to the point of Joe wants to be able to produce a report for his boss that shows activity completed within the month. And writing things up like that, I want to be able to click one button and generate 50 reports that print off to my printer without me having to do anything else.
Right.
The more you can make it about a mission and be clear about the vision for your programmers. Now, those were very simple examples, but that speaks to what I was saying earlier about the importance of what is it we're trying to accomplish?
Yeah. It's, I feel as a card-carrying Gen Xer, the idea of project management and the steps that people add to projects, I feel like we overcomplicate things a lot of the times. Whereas, something could be 4 or 5 steps. We've got to make it 10 steps just to fill out the scorecard. And what was funny, when I started working with the company, I was a lifelong radio guy. I didn't know anything really about project management or anything like that. And I remember when I was starting with the podcast, they said, oh, here's how we do the podcasts here. But it's basically like a project management software where you check boxes and stuff. And they said, so here's how you do it. And I looked at it, and I'm like, what are all these boxes and things? A lot of these things are things that you would do as part of the other thing. And I'm like, and my football coach when I was in high school used to tell me it was the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. Like, just don't overcomplicate things by adding projects. So my question to you is, Denise, and I'm sorry to get off on this tangent here, but my problem is with a lot of project management is, and especially the people who are running like the projects, is they feel like they need to add more boxes to something than are necessary. Do you see that as a problem sometimes, where people overcomplicate projects?
Oh, all the time, because I work with government customers.
Oh, geez.
But that is, in their defense, that is part of their paradigm and their safeguards. The problem with it is that it comes at a cost. All those check boxes are labor.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you do something just for the sake of doing it, you're spending money just for the sake of spending money. And so what we like to say, right-sizing a project, right-sizing the project management that's going to go with it. At one point, I even analyzed for our company what I think the minimum project management we would need on even keeping it simple to protect, the customer, to protect ourselves, to make sure that what we delivered met everyone's expectation, meant that we weren't going to take on projects less than $30,000 as a new project. I don't mind taking on a project with an existing customer, because you've done that work. You've laid the groundwork. You've trained each other. You've gotten to know each other. And all that overhead is pretty much past. But the cost of getting to know a customer, on a new project, we're looking at a minimum of $30,000 in order to have a profitable effort. And so I say that to also say that, there is requirement for risk analysis. Right? But how detailed are you going to be in your risk analysis?
And is that sort of where your expertise comes into play, where it's like, we don't need 5 boxes here, 3 suffices? Is that where sort of like your experience comes in?
Yeah. I mean, you're getting better the more experienced you become. So, I mean, you learn some hard lessons, and you may be the one paying with the extra hours. The labor may be your labor at nights and weekends to make up for mistakes you've made, but those are wonderful lessons. And the experience you gain as a project manager helps you then look at a situation and say, well, in the past I've tried this or that, and this is, just from experience, this is what I think we need to do in this situation.
And if anyone from my office is listening, I love using Workfront and project management. I'm a big fan of it. So just want to throw that in there, Denise, in case I get in trouble. There's a great story in your book about a trip that you and your aforementioned husband took to Chicago. Can you tell me about that?
The funny part is that my husband's very thrifty. And I appreciate that. Believe me, I really appreciate that, because he controls our budget and makes sure that, we're financially stable and everything. So I appreciate that very much, that he's thrifty. We walked into the mall, and there we were there for a conference, and he didn't have a dress shirt. And so we walked into a department store that I think most people know that it's pretty expensive.
Pricey? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty pricey. And we walked into the men's department, and I think I was thinking that, gosh, it might be $75 for a shirt. But, there we were, and he needed one for work. And I think the things he was looking at, he was seeing like $200.
Wow.
And he flagged down the salesperson. He said, don't you have anything that costs less? And the guy goes, there's a Gap across the street. and with, with disdain and sufficient disdain to
like
make you feel really small.
Yeah, that's their job. That's part of their job, yes. And why do you think, I always feel like Midwesterners have the best stories. Why are you so good at telling stories?
Because we don't have enough experience needing to hide information. We all live really spread out in the Midwest, I think. And, getting together with people is something that you still mostly enjoy in your community, in your church. And you get used to sharing with each other, and there's usually not too much penalty for revealing too much.
Okay, all right. I'm always curious about that because I always feel like you folks, and you call them folks there, of course, that have great stories, and always like the story about your granddad, rolling up to the factory and knowing the guy, and rolling into that random driveway and knowing the guy.
Yeah, and you might as well tell the truth anyway. That's the other part, is you might as well tell the truth anyway, because the community's small enough that people know when you're lying.
That's a good point. Yeah. All right. So I want to talk about a couple of the projects. So last year you put out the book that we've been talking about, Project Orienteering, and I want to sort of like tie this into something we talked about earlier. And the slug line to the book, that little sentence that goes on after the title, is a field guide for project leadership. And I know we've kind of touched upon this, but it's not a field guide for project management, but leadership.
Yeah.
Why was that important?
Because there are a million books on project management methodology. There are forms and charts and software, but my belief is that project success or failure comes from good leadership or the lack of it, period.
And the other project you're working on is a podcast called Tenacity Rules, and you're going to be interviewing a lot of people that have done extraordinary things. You could have done a project management podcast like you have in the past. Why was this important to you?
Because people matter. I think inspiring people. I don't think, most people, as we said earlier, project management touches all of us to some degree, no matter what job we're in. Don't even think project management methodology matters to the job we have. Still, we all are involved in projects, whether it's something in your house or, it's in the job that you're doing. Trying to find a way to help people accomplish their goals is really what my book is about. The project is a very defined set of goals. So it's a nice package of what you're about to do or what you want to try to do. But then how do you help people achieve their goals and accomplish what they want to do in life? And going back to my grandpa, that's what matters to me. And so I wanted to get a message up and out of the project management academia because people in general are not going to have that content.
Right. Well, you seem like a very busy human being, President and CEO of Jump Technology Services, the author of Project Orienteering, and also the host of the upcoming podcast, Tenacity Rules. Denise, thank you very much for carving out some time, because I know your family's been spouting grandbabies like crazy over the last year or so. So thank you for taking the time, and I look forward to hearing your podcast and see how that comes out.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
I did as well, and that's it for this edition of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you take a quick second to subscribe so you automatically get new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I would love if you jotted down a quick review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.